I Hate the News is the weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's March 4th, 2025. Will laid off federal workers take state and local government jobs, especially as public school teachers, where there is a national shortage? The Maryland State Department of Education proposes changes to high school math curriculum, cutting the current 3-year sequence of Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 to a 2-year integrated math curriculum. The DC government gets federal permission to sue violators for dumping trash in public lands. Prince George's County is also dealing with the same problem. Last year, Maryland passed a bill to rein in predatory retail choice energy suppliers. How can homeowners really support renewable expansion if they can't put solar on their rooftops? And more. Stay with us.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by UMBC's Political Science Program. If your goal is to make a meaningful impact with a career in local, state, or federal government, discover what this degree can do for you. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society moving precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Washington, D.C. area composer Anna Rubin, who used to teach music at UMBC. She has composed music across several genres, including orchestral, choral, electronica, and stage and video, including this piece, Second Nature, which was commissioned by the Baltimore Dance Project and choreographed by Doug Hamby. You can find her work at annarubinmusic.com. Both Maryland and Virginia governors have now announced state websites to help laid-off federal workers. Virginia's Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin has been expectedly muted in his public response to the Trump administration's efforts to shrink the federal government. Maryland's Democratic Governor Wes Moore has been more vocal about the unfairness of it all. Practically both states have several state and local jobs open. In Maryland, the state legislature and the governor have long complained that Maryland's previous governor, Republican Larry Hogan, had allowed state government staff to dwindle by attrition, leaving several departments such as parks and unemployment insurance and disability with many unfilled positions. Now, Governor Moore has ordered expedited processing of federal workers applying for these jobs. There are indeed many crossover skills between federal and state governments. Governor Moore recently appointed a new Secretary of Health, Meena Shashamani, who used to be the Deputy Administrator at the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services in the federal government under the Biden administration. Similarly, the state has struggled with cybersecurity. Governor Moore announced his plan to assist federal workers on February 18th, standing next to a laid-off employee of the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. But fitting in thousands of laid-off U.S. aid staff and contractors who are experts in international development is going to be harder and take time. Perhaps the biggest immediate need in state and local government is for public school teachers. Maryland alone has a shortage of 12 to 15,000 teachers. Virginia leaders talk about a 4 to 5% shortage, also in the thousands. But this will be a big career change for federal workers, with probably lower pay in most cases. Federal workers work 12 months and are paid for 12 months. Teachers work for 9 months and are paid accordingly. New teachers will also need to get teaching certifications. The teacher shortage may be detrimental to learning, but it has helped school districts and local jurisdictions run on tighter budgets. Adding significantly large numbers of teachers will mean greater budget pressure. In Maryland, the governor's budget has proposed shifting some key education spending burdens from the state to local governments. The Maryland State Department of Education recently announced that the state will overhaul its high school math curriculum, jettisoning the current 3-year sequence of Algebra 1, Geometry, and then Algebra 2 to a 2-year integrated math curriculum. I spoke with John Silkey, an MCPS math teacher who is also the president of the Maryland Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Since the changes are new and discussions are ongoing, here is John Silkey speaking on behalf of himself.
The big push came from the blueprint. Students are supposed to be college and career ready by the end of 10th grade. And in math, taking Algebra 2 by 10th grade would make somebody college and career ready. The state saw if a student were taking Algebra 1 in 9th grade, and they did a traditional Algebra 1 geometry, Algebra 2 sequence, they could not be college and career ready by 10th grade because they would be taking Algebra 2 in 11th grade. Integrated math is something that's done around the world. There are some states that currently do integrated math. North Carolina is one of them that I know of off the top of my head. I think California has some as well. But one of the things that's different in those states is they do integrated math, but they do it over 3 years instead of 2 years. The state of Maryland didn't want to do that. They wanted to do in 2 years because of the idea of college and career readiness by 10th grade.
When you take 3 years of instruction and squish it down to 2 years of instructions, you're making choices. Do you have a sense of what choices they are making?
The curriculum hasn't been shared. This is supposed to roll out in potentially not next year, but I think the year after. From my understanding, really de-emphasizing geometry.
Why is geometry devalued in this way?
If you think about geometric standards in elementary and middle school, things like area, things like volume, things like perimeter, all of those things are done in earlier grades. A lot of our geometry course starts looking at right triangles and Pythagorean theorem. Well, that's something that's done in Algebra 2. Over the course of many years, there's been a less emphasis on proofs.
What happens to trigonometry?
Most trigonometry is done in Algebra 2 and pre-calculus.
What do you think are the difficulties in implementing this new curriculum?
In order for a student to graduate from Maryland, they must have at least 4 math credits. One course must be Algebra 1 or have Algebra 1 as a prerequisite. One course must be geometry or connect to geometry standards. Obviously, those regulations with the new curriculum will have to be changed. Many of the students that I've traditionally taught who you wouldn't consider are traditional math people. They're more creative. They're more, there might be the writers, they might be the, theater folks. They love geometry. They love the ability to sort of not have to deal with these formulas, to be able to draw things, to be able to think of things creatively. And in some ways, when you have that Algebra 1 geometry, Algebra 2 sequence, that geometry is kind of like this little break from them. And in some cases, some people say, okay, you know what? Maybe math isn't so bad when they have this geometry. Well, now we're taking that away. A fourth challenge that I think about, which I personally have raised with MSDE, and they say, well, we just hope. So part of the change as well is that MSDE strongly recommends no acceleration in grades K through 5. So students in grades K through 5 would be doing, math in K. All the students in K through 5 would do the same. There's a potential for acceleration in middle school where 8th graders could take this integrated math 1 course. That's sort of their ideal. That is what they presented.
I think parents will be upset with that.
The state will not mandate a county to do anything because that's not part of their role. But if the county says, you know what, we're going to continue with our accelerated elementary school math, that theoretically could put a 7th grader taking the integrated math 1 and an 8th grader taking the integrated math 2, which then could leave a 9th grader doing pre-calculus.
Is that wrong?
you're then going to have so many students taking pre-calculus as freshmen and taking calculus BC as juniors. I think that should be the exception rather than the rule. But the way that we currently have it in at least Montgomery County, maybe other counties, is it could become more of the rule.
John Silkey, thank you.
Thank you, Sunil.
Illegal trash dumping has been a long-standing problem in the District of Columbia, especially on the east side along the Anacostia River and in Prince George's County. But recently, D.C. won the authority from the federal government to sue illegal dumpers. Trey Sherrod of the nonprofit Anacostia Riverkeeper has more.
The law is quite clear. Thou shalt not dump trash anywhere that's not a trash can or a dumpster. Enforcement for a very long time was virtually non-existent. Enforcement is starting to pick back up. In DC, they have a program called Dump Busters, which deliberately connects the Department of Energy and Environment with Metropolitan Police Department's Environmental Crimes Unit. Now, as I understand it, the Environmental Crimes Unit got slashed 2 or 3 years ago. They had 5 or 6 people, and now they're like 2. So that has further dampened enforcement. But that program at least exists. That has led to lots of cameras at sites that were known to be illegal dumping hotspots. DC had to ask for, but did finally get permission to shift prosecution of illegal dumping crimes from the federal court to our local attorney general. So DC is now prosecuting all the illegal dumping crimes that happen in DC. And that's really good because previously the federal prosecutors it was not a priority for them, right? They were slapping these dumpers on the wrist, see you back in court in 3 to 6 months. Right? So enforcement in the field was happening, but enforcement in court was not. Now, the Attorney General's office in DC is able to pursue this to the full extent of the law, which is not insignificant, right? They are putting people in jail. They're taking their trucks. They're levying pretty heavy fines. And so enforcement has become meaningful in DC. Unfortunately, a lot of the dumpers were actually not even from DC in the first place, right? So they were crossing state lines to come dump. Prince George's County, I don't know if this is statewide or county only. I've seen the signs in Prince George's County. You can actually get points on your license for illegal dumping, which seems like a slap on the wrist. But if your whole livelihood is using your truck to go do these little like side tasks, that can become a big problem. To my knowledge, they don't have a Dump Busters program. And now we're seeing that the dumping is still continuing there. A lot of different materials get dumped. So tires seem to be the first thing that shows up. The closest place we know of to legally recycle tires is up by Baltimore. Another big cluster of what we see is construction debris.
Trey Sherrod of Anacostia Riverkeeper talking about illegal dumping of trash in the region. Last year, 2024, the Maryland legislature passed a law that sought to regulate retail choice energy suppliers. Retail choice energy suppliers are private companies from whom you can notionally buy your electricity in the belief that they are supporting renewable generation. This is an accounting process. Once generated and part of the electric grid, there is no way to distinguish a fossil fuel-produced electron from a solar-produced electron. But by passing ratepayer money to renewable producers, the hope is to encourage green generation. The companies in this business have used awful market practices, including bait and switch, to overcharge Maryland ratepayers for over a decade, and finally, last year the legislature acted. Now, retail choice energy suppliers are chafing under new rules. Laurel Peltier is a Baltimore-based clean energy advocate who works to help those affected by the predatory practices of these companies. She offers 2 ways in which to support green generation, even when you cannot put solar on your roof.
SB 1 was passed into law in May of 2024, and it reformed the retail energy market, it did basically 5 things. It requires retail suppliers that sell to homeowners or residential accounts to meet or beat regulated electricity and gas rates. For your eco buyers, it requires suppliers to disclose that the green energy offer they're buying is based on a renewable energy certificate, and also to explain where that renewable energy certificate came from. Thirdly, the law requires that these suppliers show the Public Service Commission what their offer is and have the rate approved so that consumers in Maryland are paying for what they're buying, an appropriate rate. And then it eliminated this very wonky regulation called purchase of receivables. And really what that means for consumers is that retail suppliers are now responsible for their bad debt. In the old model, it was actually regulated utility ratepayers picking up the bad debt. And it gives the OPC and the PSC a lot more tools in their tool chest to enforce rules.
OPC stands for the Office of People's Counsel, which is a consumer advocate in the state of Maryland. PSC stands for Public Service Commission, which is the regulatory authority over all utilities in the state and approves electricity and gas rates charged by utilities. Prior to SB 1, the 2024 law, the rates charged by retail choice energy suppliers were not set by the PSC, the Public Service Commission. And the industry is believed to have overcharged Maryland ratepayers significantly.
Yes, it's about 1.6 billion. And it's actually that there's lots of data, and that data is self-reported retail supplier data on electricity. It has been a market that did not meet expectations. Finally, the state just had to step in legislatively and put the laws in place to really have a better consumer level playing field.
So even as SB 1 fixes these problems with retail choice energy suppliers, you are suggesting some alternative ways in which homeowners, ratepayers can join the renewable energy system in a different way. What are these?
There are some really easy consumer tools available to buy green electricity in Maryland. There's 2. The first one is join your community solar farm. You can go to a website called EnergySage.com and put in your zip code, and you'll find the local community solar farm, off-site farm that's attached to your utility, and you subscribe to it. It's a billing product. It is not putting solar panels on your house. You get a discount. It is based on regulated rates. It's not this whole bait and switch promo and you got to keep reshopping. You just subscribe to a solar farm and you support that solar farm. I've been on community solar for about 6 years. I can pay my community solar electricity bill on my credit card to get the points. I can't do that on my BG&E account. It's local, it's new solar that was developed within your utility territory that's feeding solar energy right into your local grid. That isn't what retail suppliers were offering. They're matching your regular local grid electricity that we're all hooked up to with a financial tool called a renewable energy certificate called RECs. So the second idea I have is you can buy those RECs directly from a company that's been around for a long time. It's called TerraPass, TerraPass.com. And it's kind of a climate-friendly solution to buy your RECs directly. You'll know what kind of RECs you're supporting. It's $10 per REC. A REC covers 1,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. It's about a month's use.
The retail choice energy companies were buying these renewable energy certificates to justify adding green energy to the grid.
Yes.
Whether that happened or not is different, but as a financial instrument, they were doing that. They paid on an average $100 for every 1,000 kilowatt, which is one rec.
Yes.
In contrast, TerraPass sells recs for between $7 and $10.
It's just like a product. You go online and you buy one rec for $10.
So it makes sense for consumers interested in subsidizing green energy production to just buy it from TerraPass rather than buying it from Retail Choice Energy folks.
I think it's an option.
How much can a typical homeowner in Maryland hope to save using community solar?
For homeowners that make $75,000 gross income or less, they can save 20% off of both supply and delivery, which can be a lot. And that's important to know because retail supplier discounts were only off of supply. And very, very few people were saving because, half a cent off of your supply rate isn't very much a year. And if you make more than that, you get 10.
Laurel Peltier, thank you.
You're welcome. Have a sunny day.
That's all for this episode. Be sure to check out our feature interview series that comes out Friday mornings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities at Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from Washington, D.C. area composer Anna Rubin, who used to teach music at UMBC. The piece from which we have excerpted music for this episode is called Second Nature and was commissioned by the Baltimore Dance Project. You can find her work at annarubinmusic.com. If you want to share your music on this show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.